When I was about to click purchase on the Xbox Series S, I paused. What don't I know? Now having had the Series S for quite a few months, let's go over some of the things I wish I knew before I purchased this little machine. Hey, I'm Sam with Busy Dad Gaming. I help busy dads find what Xbox and PC games to play so they can relax and go back to their families recharged. Now, anybody that has a child will know that you're probably going to get sick way more often. So I actually caught a cold here over the past week and just kind of powering through it, but oof. I was going through my day just minding my own business when all of a sudden it happened. I saw a Series S available on Microsoft's website via their All Access Pass. Now, I didn't even think twice about it. I just went and jumped right in line and I bought it on their monthly program. But what did I wish I knew before I purchased that little machine? Now, the first thing I wish I knew is that how the All Access program actually works. So to start, it's a credit line that requires you to go ahead and qualify for the account. And then once you are approved, you'll get an account with the lender. And then you'll also need to start tying things to your Microsoft account. So in this particular case, you'll get the approval, you'll get the Xbox in the mail, and then you start activating the Xbox, you activate your Game Pass Ultimate, and then you go ahead and in the lender account, start setting up your payment information and things of that nature. So there's two different things that you'll need to tackle on this. The other thing to keep in mind is because it is a line of credit and you have a draw against that line, you're going to be making monthly payments on it. So for me personally, it came out to like 26 and change, and that's covering both the S and Game Pass Ultimate. Now, when you activate your Game Pass Ultimate, it'll go ahead and apply 2 years to your Microsoft account. You'll be paying for it via the lender account. So again, that's just something that you'll need to keep in mind. Ultimately, All Access made it getting an Xbox console relatively easy. I just wish it was more clear on what the overall process was. So hopefully this helps you out. Now, the next thing I wish I had known is just how big of a value Game Pass was actually going to be for the Series S. Now, prior to this, I had the Series X. I didn't use Game Pass all that much. And then on the One X, I didn't really use Game Pass all that much. But with the Series S, this kind of pushed me into that because I was already paying for a lot of Game Pass anyway. And so Game Pass by itself, once you actually dive into it, you start to look at all the different games that are available. You have EA Play games that are made available. And so you're ultimately getting hundreds of games via this program. And with the Series S, it just really made it a no-brainer. Now, add on top of that, Game Pass Ultimate also gives you access to cloud gaming. So you can also start to look at gaming through a browser, through your phone, through a tablet. It gives you more ways to interact with your content than ever before. So this was another nice benefit that ended up coming with the Game Pass Ultimate program. And really, it comes down to Game Pass really gave me access to games that I normally wouldn't have played. And in this particular case, you have games that, like Hades, for example, I wouldn't have spent money on it initially, but because I got access to the game via Game Pass, I've done probably about 10 hours worth of time into that particular game and I've really enjoyed it. Game Pass really is a win-win for gamers, and when you have a Series S coupled with Game Pass Ultimate, in my personal opinion, it is easily one of the best values in gaming. Now, the next thing I wish I'd known from a Series S perspective is that it does support the latest and greatest in technologies that the Series X does, just in a much lower degree. So, for example, you're going to be looking at variable refresh rates, ray tracing. You get up to 120 frames per second, but there's compromises you're taking in relation to those. So you're going to see dips in the resolution as a result. So where the Series X is aiming for 4K 120, the Series S is aiming for 1440 120. And in many cases, it's not going to hit that benchmark. It's going to downscale the resolution to hit those higher frame rates. The Series S does look fantastic, and depending on what TV you have the upsampling on the box, and then you have the upsampling that the TV can also do. So for example, I use a Sony X90J, and with the processor that it has in that particular TV, you have the Series S doing its upsampling, and then the Sony TV is also doing its AI upsampling as well to make that image look even better. The only downside again is that it doesn't have variable refresh rates on that TV, so I'm getting higher resolutions, but I'm getting potentially lower frames per second. So that's some of those compromises that you're going to have to look at when it comes to a Series S. You're not going to get everything. Now, the next thing I wish I knew when it came to a Series S is that you may need to change your settings, both on the TV and the console. Now, this really will depend on what TV you're using. I'm going to go strictly off of Sony and some of the other TVs that I've had, both TCL and Vizio. I haven't seen this on the LG, so this is just something that you're gonna have to test out, but this does vary by TV. So now on the Sony X90J, I had to actually go through and use HDMI ports 3 or 4. This is pretty common with most TVs, but those are the 2 ports on that TV that support up to 120 Hertz. Now, the other thing you need to go into and look at is on the console. And you go in there and you look under the settings under TV video, and then look at what resolution you're actually running at. You may need to change it to either 4K or 1440p, depending on what you're gonna be looking at. These are things that you're gonna need to take into account. Otherwise, you may be playing, all these different games in 1080p at 60 Hertz, and not even know it. I made that mistake, so hopefully you don't make the same one. Now, the next thing I wish I knew is that the Series S comes with an HDMI 2.0 cable. So it's not an HDMI 2.1 cable. Now, for the Series S, this really isn't a big deal because it's, again, aiming for 1440p at 120. Now, if you are trying to swap cables out, for example, then this could potentially be an issue for you. So again, not really a big deal, but just something I wish I had known. The cable is HDMI 2.0 that comes in the box. Now, the next thing I wish I had known is something that I already saw on the Series X, but it's definitely something to take note on the Series S, is just how much I was going to love Quick Resume. So this is something that I thoroughly loved having both on the Series S and the X, and when you have the storage card on top of it, it just makes it that much better. Which, this leads me right into the next point, in that I wish I knew with the Series S, and just how much the lack of storage was going to drive me insane. Now, the Series S comes with 364 gigs of usable storage. For most people, this may or may not be an issue. Now, for me personally, yeah, it drove me absolutely insane. So I was constantly having to swap, either delete or re-download games. And ultimately what I ended up doing is I got a storage card just for this pure reason, is then I can go ahead and have stuff on the internal storage that I only plan to play on the Series S. And then everything else just ends up going on the card, and I can swap that between the S and the X. And this is something I actually mentioned in my Series S review, is that ultimately this will become an issue for most people, especially as the generation continues on. I do feel that the Series S will end up getting a refresh down the road that will increase the storage size. So that's something to keep in mind. But the storage card from Seagate, I'm also pretty sure is going to run out of its exclusivity time. And then you'll start to see more companies jump into that fray, which then will start to reduce the cost of those cards. One or the other is going to ultimately end up happening. Which one will end up happening first? I'm betting that the storage card will start to come down in price in relation to everything else on the market. Storage is definitely one of the biggest cons, and something I wish I had seen a little bit more ahead of time. Now, the last thing I wish I had known before I purchased the Series S is that just because a game is on Game Pass does not mean it's a Play Anywhere title. Outer Worlds is a perfect example of this because it's not a Play Anywhere title. Now, a Play Anywhere title is something where you can go and play on a series console and a PC. And in Outer Worlds, I played it on the X and the S because I had it on that storage card. Sometime I wanted to go ahead and play it on my PC, which has a 3080 in it. Because this title was not a Play Anywhere title, that means you have 2 different saves. They're not something that you can just cross over like some other games. So whatever you use on the series consoles will not work on the PC. Now, a example of a title that is a Play Anywhere title is Hades. So this is a game I've been playing over both on the X and the S, and I wanted to go ahead and jump over and start playing it on the PC as well. And I could, because the cloud save was across those different arenas. So what this means is that if you want a game that can play both on a Series S and a PC, it needs to be a Play Anywhere title. Now, there are quite a few Play Anywhere titles on Game Pass. I would go ahead and just check the list. They're all sitting on there on Xbox's website. There is one caveat to this, and this is something that happened to me on Hades. I played it on the Series X and the S, had a great time, and then I wanted to play it on the PC as I mentioned. But the 2 saves weren't the same save, and so I didn't think twice about it. I went ahead and just overwrote what was sitting on the PC. This was also like 2 weeks out of date, so I ended up losing 2 weeks worth of progress because I just didn't pay attention. When you're using a Play Anywhere title, just make sure that the save that you're actually using from your cloud save is the most up-to-date cloud save. Now, coming at this from a dad's perspective, a lot of the things that I wish I knew before getting a Series S really aren't big things. They're not like this huge thing that was missing from the console. It was more of like a lot of little things, and more so just things that I ended up learning along the way, and that I wanted to pass on some of that knowledge so that if you are in fact looking for a Series S, these are some of the things that you're going to also want to keep in mind. Now, ultimately, I still do believe that the Series S today, when coupled with Game Pass, is one of the best values in gaming today. And if you already own a PS5, then the Series S is the best way to dive into the Xbox ecosystem when coupled with Game Pass. So you're not only getting access to the PS5 exclusives that are coming, like Spider-Man 2, Wolverine, all these different amazing games that are coming, but then you also get access to Xbox games as well via Game Pass. So you get access to Halo and Forza and all these other different things, and you get those day and date, and you're not having to pay additional items for it. In this particular case, I would still buy the Series S again. I love this little console. I have it upstairs, and I just hot swap the storage cards when there's games that I want on both consoles. It is easily one of the best purchases that I've made when it came to a console. And I would recommend anybody that is at least a little bit interested in the Xbox ecosystem to dive into the Series S with Game Pass and test it out for yourselves. Now make sure to check out my review of the Series S if you're still on the fence of what kind of console to get, and I'll see you in the next video.